like the girls.
You stayed at Epstein's place in
But
Manhattan.
he didn't look like any different to another rich guy that you
Fine.
would have with, people around.
Although I wonder whether the difference for you was when you were at Epstein's place, you say you felt exceptionally uncomfortable and you felt like you were being watched.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah, I do remember that.
In a whirlwind of scandal, Prince Andrew's name has been tied to controversy for years. But now, shocking revelations from his former girlfriends are shedding light on his behavior behind closed doors. What is the truth about Andrew's actions? What Prince Andrew was really like behind the scenes has shocked even those closest to him. His former partners have come forward, exposing details of a life marked by entitlement, arrogance, and a sense of disregard for those around him. These personal accounts paint a troubling picture of a man who seemed oblivious to the consequences of his actions. The shocking truth about his behavior is finally being revealed, and it's more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Stay tuned as we dive into the secrets that have been kept hidden for far too long.
Now, an ex-royal staff member has opened up about his time working at Buckingham Palace. Dan Ottaway, who served as a chef, claims that out of all of the royals that he catered for, Prince Andrew was difficult and more demanding than others. I mean, he's certainly not getting a good rap.
Susanna Constantine, well-known television personality and former girlfriend of Prince Andrew, shocked the public when she openly discussed her experiences with the prince in an interview. Constantine, who was once part of the royal circle, did not mince words when speaking about the prince's behavior, labeling him as both ignorant and entitled. She painted a vivid picture of a man who, despite his privileged upbringing and royal status, appeared to feel as though the world owed him something, rather than understanding that his position required responsibility, humility, and self-awareness. Constantine's most revealing statement was that Andrew acted as if the rules did not apply to him. She recounted numerous instances when Andrew would lash out, losing his temper over the smallest inconveniences, showing a side of him that many royal watchers had never witnessed before. Her words exposed a prince who seemed utterly unaware of how his behavior would impact those around him, especially the people who worked with him or were close to him. If he had to slow down for a minute, he'd shout out the window, "You effing buffoons," she recalled, adding that Andrew would fly off the handle at even the smallest mistakes, whether in private or in public.
But this, I think, points to just his sense of entitlement, the sort of element of droit de seigneur that he had.
The behavior Constantine described fits into a larger pattern of arrogance and lack of empathy, traits that have defined Andrew's reputation in recent years. As the years went by, more stories emerged about his shocking disregard for others. From crude jokes at parties to tantrums behind closed doors, Andrew's behavior was often seen as a manifestation of his belief that he was above reproach. For many, this sense of entitlement was the root cause of Andrew's troubles, with his high-profile relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein acting as the final nail in the coffin of his royal career. In an explosive interview with royal biographer Andrew Loney, the topic of Andrew's relationship with Epstein came to the forefront. Loney discussed the tsunami of coverage surrounding Andrew following the leak of emails, allegedly from Ghislaine Maxwell, that exposed deep ties between the prince and the financier.
The relationship with Epstein was much closer than he's claimed. I mean, he would say that he only saw him a few times. But they were very good friends in the way that Epstein was very good friends with Trump. Epstein described Andrew as the only person he's found that's more perverted than I am. He called him the king of kink.
According to the biographer, Epstein referred to Andrew as the king of kink, adding to the growing list of allegations surrounding the prince's conduct. These revelations, alongside claims that Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife, received $2 million from Epstein, painted a disturbing picture of Andrew's connections to a man whose criminal activities would eventually ensnare him in a web of scandal. Loney did not stop there. He went on to discuss the endemic corruption within the royal family, referring to how Andrew's behavior was tolerated and even protected for so long, despite mounting evidence of misconduct. The biographer suggested that Andrew's downfall was inevitable, pointing out that his actions over the years, from his involvement with Epstein to his treatment of staff and colleagues, had created a legacy of disgrace that would be impossible to shake off. Loney also hinted that Andrew may one day flee to the Middle East to escape legal repercussions, but such a move would only serve to further alienate him from his family and the public. The royal family, once a symbol of unity and grace, now seemed divided over how to deal with the prince. While his brother, Prince Charles, made a commitment to look after Andrew. There were whispers throughout the palace that no one truly liked him. His behavior had made him enemies in every corner of royal life, from staff members to his fellow royals, and this toxic reputation would only continue to grow as new details about his past came to light. One of the most striking testimonies came from Paul Page, a former security guard for the royal family. In a revealing interview with 60 Minutes in 2022, Page shared his first-hand account of dealing with Prince Andrew's outrageous antics while working at Buckingham Palace.
Unfortunately, Prince Andrew was totally different. He could fly off the handle at the smallest thing. He would be abusive. He would shout, he would swear. So we had a particular issue.
Page's story painted a vivid picture of a prince who was not only difficult to manage, but also exhibited a total lack of respect for those around him. He described how Andrew's behavior was often outrageous and showed no regard for the boundaries or rules that were supposed to govern royal conduct. Page's account only added to the mounting evidence that Andrew's sense of entitlement had led him down a dangerous and reckless path. Prince Andrew's behavior towards his staff was only the tip of the iceberg, however. As the scandal involving his ties to Epstein and his other alleged misdeeds continued to unfold, the world began to see just how deeply ingrained these issues were, from his involvement in the sex trafficking scandal to his apparent indifference to the suffering of his victims. Andrew's actions painted a grim portrait of a man who was living a life of privilege, but with no understanding of the responsibilities that came with it. Constantine's revelations about Andrew, along with the interviews from those who had witnessed his behavior firsthand, exposed the prince's true nature in a way that could no longer be ignored. The entitlement, the tantrums, the disregard for others, these were the traits that defined Andrew's legacy. The growing body of evidence, coupled with the public fallout from his association with Epstein, left little doubt that his downfall was not a matter of misunderstanding, but rather a pattern of destructive behavior that had finally caught up with him.
Epstein was pandering girls to Prince Andrew, and who is a thoroughly repulsive human being. But he has all these teddy bears. The house manager where he lives, they're supposed to have the teddy bears on his bed in a certain way. And if the teddy bears aren't on his bed the way that he likes them, then he has a conniption.
Years before the scandal surrounding Prince Andrew's ties to Jeffrey Epstein came to light, there were multiple warning signs that hinted at his eventual downfall. One of the most chilling predictions came from actress and model Vicky Hodges, who crossed paths with Andrew in the early 1980s. Hodges, who was older and more worldly than the young prince, immediately noticed traits in Andrew that were troubling. She described him as self-absorbed, arrogant, and immature, characteristics that would only become more evident in the decades to follow. Her observations, which were made long before the world knew about his association with Epstein, painted a picture of a man who was already heading down a destructive path, but who refused to acknowledge his own flaws. Hodges' descriptions were more than just casual judgments. They now read like a prophetic warning. According to her, Andrew was unable to learn from his mistakes, a trait that would prove to be fatal for his royal career. She recalled him as a young man who thrived on attention and behaved without boundaries, often making crude jokes and seeking to dominate conversations. Despite his royal status, he was described as someone who sought validation from the wrong places, whether through pranks at parties or inappropriate behavior. Hodges' reflections on Andrew were not just about a spoiled royal, but a deeply troubled individual who, even then, was displaying a disregard for the rules and norms expected of someone in his position. Fast forward decades later, and the world would see just how true Hodges' insights were. The infamous Epstein scandal would bring Andrew's behavior into sharp focus, and his connection to the convicted sex offender would expose the extent of his arrogance and self-entitlement. But long before these accusations emerged, Andrew had already displayed a pattern of immaturity, entitlement, and complete disregard for the consequences of his actions, traits that were now eerily aligned with Hodges' early warnings.
It had about 50 or 60 stuffed toys positioned on the bed. And basically, there was a card the inspector showed us in a drawer, and it's a picture of these bears all in situ on the bed. And the reason for the laminated picture was that if those bears weren't put back in the right order by the maids, he would...
In a revealing interview, former Royal Protection Officer Paul Page added another unsettling layer to Andrew's behavior. He disclosed that the prince had a collection of stuffed animals that needed to be set up in a specific way each day. If this arrangement was disturbed, Andrew would reportedly fly into a rage. This peculiar detail adds yet another dimension to Andrew's character, showing a level of childishness and obsessive control that only further highlights his inability to navigate adulthood in a mature, responsible manner. While many might dismiss such a quirk as simply eccentric, Page's account serves as a window into Andrew's psyche, a man who, despite his age and status, seemed to cling to childhood comforts and rituals, unable to adapt to the expectations of adulthood or his royal responsibilities. This pattern of obsessive control and self-centered behavior ties back to the larger issues that plagued Andrew throughout his life. It's not just about having an inflated sense of entitlement, but about the inability to understand the consequences of one's actions. The stuffed animal incident is just another example of his need for control in a world that constantly demanded him to behave with responsibility and dignity. The more we learn about Andrew's behavior, the more it becomes apparent that his troubled relationships, whether with his ex-girlfriend, the royal family, or the public, stemmed from a deeper, unaddressed immaturity.
He was helping women go to Epstein. He was finding them, chatting them up and passing them on in the late 1990s.
When we link this obsessive need for control to his later connection with Jeffrey Epstein, it becomes clear that Andrew's failings were not just personal quirks or missteps, but rather a reflection of his inability to live up to the expectations of his royal status. As his ex-girlfriend Susanna Constantine and others have pointed out, Andrew seemed to believe the world owed him something. He ignored advice and warnings, dismissing the realities of his actions until it was far too late. The Epstein case, in many ways, became a culmination of this long-standing pattern, one where Andrew's sense of entitlement and disregard for rules led him down a path of scandal that not only damaged his reputation, but also dragged the royal family into a public relations nightmare. The warning signs were there long before the Epstein revelations, from Hodge's early observations to the strange behavior revealed by Paul Page. Both point to a man who never learned to mature, someone who believed that the world would bend to his will. And in the end, it was this arrogance and immaturity that led to his public disgrace, with the Epstein case merely serving as the tipping point for a man whose behavior had been called into question for decades.
I admire his extraordinary achievement in becoming the president now, and I like him, and I've always liked him. So that is the sum and substance of my entire relationship with him.
Out front now, Barry Levine, the former editor of the National Enquirer, author of The Spider, which is about...
In the wake of the mounting scandals, including his ties to Jeffrey Epstein and countless allegations, Prince Andrew's titles were finally stripped. This dramatic fall from grace marked the end of his royal career, a consequence of years of entitlement, immaturity, and a refusal to take responsibility for his actions. His ex-girlfriend, Susanna Constantine, had warned of these traits long before the public revelations, calling out his arrogance and ignorance. Her words, once dismissed as harsh, now seem eerily prophetic. As the once prominent prince fades into the background, his legacy remains tarnished by his own behavior and decisions.